A CBS News inquiry. The Warren Report continues. Here again is Walter Cronkite.
In Abraham Zapruder's film of the assassination, the fatal shot appears to move the president's head back. The critics contend this can only mean the shot came not from the book depository, but from somewhere in front. Not for the first time, nor for the last in these reports, we find equally qualified experts in disagreement. We put the question of the president's head movement to an experienced photo analyst and two expert pathologists.
From a physicist's point of view, from a photographic analysis point of view, what can you tell about the direction of the bullet?
Well, in frame 313, there was an apparent explosion at this point, which would be on the front side of the head. Now, characteristically, this would indicate to me that the bullet came from behind, and this is what's called spalling. It's a minor explosion where pieces of material have left and go generally in the direction of the bullet.
But now, the explosion, this minor explosion, occurs forward of the president. Now, wouldn't that indicate the bullet coming from the front?
No, quite contrary. It does indicate that the bullet was coming from behind.
You're aware that some critics say by the very fact that in the picture you can clearly see the explosion of the bullet on the front side of the president, that certainly indicates the bullet came from the front.
Well, I don't believe any physicist has ever said that. This picture might explain the principle that we've been talking about just a little bit more clearly. It's a picture taken in the millionth of a second of a .30 caliber bullet being shot through an electric light bulb. The bullet was traveling from this direction, entered the light bulb here, passed through, and caused a rather violent explosion to occur on the exiting side, and is very similar to the situation in the Zapruder Kennedy assassination films.
That is one explanation from a physicist as to how a head could move backward after being struck from behind, which seems to many laymen not possible. Forensic pathologists are experts in the examination of victims of violent death, both medically and legally qualified. Dan Rather put the matter to one of them, Dr. Cyril W. Wecht, professor at Duquesne University.
I have seen too many biological and physical variations occur in forensic pathology to say that it would have been impossible. I say that it is quite unlikely. I say that it is difficult for me to accept, but I would have to admit that it is a possibility that his body could have moved in that direction after having been struck by a bullet that hit him in the back of the head.
Eyewitnesses and even film analysts often produce as many problems as they solve. In this case, the physical evidence would seem to be more reliable, and that evidence came first to the attention of the doctors at Parkland Hospital, who were the first to look closely at both the massive head wound and the less critical neck wound. Eyewitnesses and even film analysts often produce as many problems as they solve. In this case, the physical evidence would seem to be more reliable, and that evidence came first to the attention of the doctors at Parkland Hospital, who were the first to look closely at both the massive head wound and the less critical neck wound. At Parkland, Dr. Malcolm Perry, attending surgeon, tried desperately to keep the president alive, but the very urgency of that problem prevented him from examining the two wounds, as he now explains in his first public statement since the report was published.
I noted a wound when I came into the room, which was of the right posterior portion of the head. Of course, I did not examine it. Again, there was no time for cursory examinations, and if a patent airway could not be secured and the bleeding could not be controlled, it really made very little difference. Some things must take precedence and priority, and in this instance, the airway and the bleeding must be controlled initially.
Well, what about this wound that you observed in the front of the president's neck? Would you tell me about that?
Yes, of course. It was a very cursory examination. The emergency proceedings at hand necessitated immediate action. There was not time to do more than an extremely light examination.
There's been a lot said and written about was this an exit wound or an entry wound? Would you discuss that with me, sir?
And this is a difficult problem. The determination of entrance or exit frequently requires the ascertation of trajectory. And of course, this I did not do. None of us did at the time. There was no time for such things. The differentiation between the entrance and exit wound is often made on a disparity in sizes, the exit wound generally being larger in the case of an expanding bullet. If, however, the bullet does not expand, if it is a full-jacketed bullet, for example, such as used commonly in the military, the caliber of the bullet on entrance and exit will frequently be the same. And without deformation of the bullet and without tumbling, the wounds will be very similar, and in many instances, even the trained observer could not distinguish between the two.
Did it occur to you at the time, or did you think, was this an entry wound or was this an exit wound?
Actually, I didn't really give it much thought, and realized that perhaps it had been better had I done so. But I actually applied my energies, and those of us there all did, to the problem at hand, and I didn't really concern myself too much with how it happened or why. And for that reason, of course, I didn't think about cutting through the wound, which, of course, rendered it inviolate for as regards further examination and inspection. But it didn't even occur to me. I did what was expedient and what was necessary, and I didn't think much about it.
You did not turn the president over?
No, there was no reason to. There was not time at that problem, and there was really no reason to. It made very little difference to me, since my immediate concern was with an attempted resuscitation.
The nature of the throat wound can no longer be verified, for no records were made and no pictures taken before Dr. Perry cut through it in an attempt to relieve his patient's breathing. The doctors at Parkland were engaged in a desperate struggle to keep the president alive. All else was secondary. But their task was impossible. One of the shots had virtually destroyed the president's head. Even as the doctors worked, the president died. At the hospital, the scene was turbulent and disordered. The press and public were clamoring for news. Dr. Perry was rushed from the emergency room to a news conference where he was badgered into giving a description of the wounds. The neck wound, he told the press, looked like an entry wound, and he pointed to the front of his neck. In the transcript of that news conference, there's no doubt that Dr. Perry made it sound as if he had a firm opinion. Well, the reporters flashed the news, and in that moment of confusion and misunderstanding established once and for all in the minds of a great many people a conviction that at least one bullet had been fired from the